My El Salvador is a mess. I haven't done a chop and extend for this plant in, I think, over 2 years. And I've kind of just been trialing the plant up and down. But as a result of that, I am losing maturity with these vines that aren't attaching to the pole. So, in today's video, we are going to chop up this plant. We're going to do an extension, and I actually want to extend the bottom part as well, so that I end up having two. I want to grow one of them indoors, and I want one of them to go on my wall of aeroids behind me, and then over the next couple of months we can kind of compare those two a little bit. Good morning, Tiger. Are you supervising? Awesome. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. This is my Monstera siltepecana El Salvador, and as you might be able to see, it's a mess. Let me bring you a bit closer. I honestly don't remember when I did the last extend, but there's a bunch of roots sticking out the pot. With the last extension, I also put the top and the bottom part in one pot together. I mean, have a look at these roots over here. That's pretty crazy. And the plant has grown really nice. It has some great fenestrations. But there's also lots and lots of yellow leaves over here. Just the bottom part looks a little bit sad. Also, there's lots of just vines just hanging around, like this one over here, that is not making contact with the actual pole, and as a result of it, the leaves are getting much smaller. So have a look at this vine just trailing down, tiny leaves. The same vine climbing, huge leaves with fenestrations, and that's obviously what I want. So in preparation for today, I have already chopped all of the stems where the moss poles meet. So my moss poles are always made out of 2 segments of 90 centimeters, so they end up being 180 centimeters. Oh, okay. I was like, why is this so tall? Because I'm 180 something. Here we go. If I put it down on the ground, you'll see the pole is kind of like 180-ish tall. Alright, but it's a bit unstable, so I've got to keep it in that heavy decorative planter. So in preparation, I already chopped up the plant yesterday, and you've seen all of the crazy roots. Unfortunately, I'll try and save some of them where I can, but I've got the feeling a lot of them might not really be savable and instead just have to be sacrificed. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to look for roots like this one, for example, that comes from the top, and then I'm trying to find if I can kind of free this up, or at least free up as much as possible. A lot of these roots have come from the top actually. Sorry, this is taking all of my concentration. I think that's good enough. So the reason why this plant has suffered a little bit is because it hasn't been extended in a long time, or hasn't been a chop and extend in a long time. I think it's been 2 years. I've really just been trialing this plant up and down, and that is just not optimizing the plant's potential. If I would really want to optimize the plant's potential, I would really want the plant to continuously climb, because that signalizes maturity and that's giving me the large leaves. When the plant is trialing down, it loses maturity. Also means that these leaves are really old, right? Like if I continuously chop and extend, then I obviously continuously replace the bottom part of the pole, whereas over here, this bottom part of the pole has been with the pole for a long time. How do I go about this? So the leaves are just old. That is just it. Is there anything else stuck on here? Oh, there we go. Okay. You can see I was able to at least save these roots. Not all of them. I definitely had to cut through some of them, like this one over here. But that's okay. And we're gonna assess the state of all of these things hanging around in a hot minute. For now, the reason I kept this stake on there is because the plant is actually kind of growing over and around the stake. So I'm trying to Just push the stake. Perfect. There you go. And now I can just put, I just banged it on there, and now I can just put a new pole on top of that. We'll park this on the side for now. Sorry, I'm really not prepared. The problem here is we need to suss out what's going into the pot, right? This part of the pole will be covered by the pot. So, oh shit. Oh no. Okay, can't lie it down. Already snapped the leaf off. Oh my god, look at this carnage on the floor. Okay, clearly I didn't plan this through, but I'm gonna pop this all in a pot now. I'll bring you closer in a sec. So I pop this all on a pot, and yes, it's quite a small pot, but that's okay. I'll twist the roots in here, as well as the vines, these random vines. Oh my god, this stake at the top. Okay, have a look. I twisted the roots in here, and I twisted the vines in here as well, so these vines can now root and then grow new shoots from the pot. Okay, and now I fill it up with airwood mix. Oh, so nice to be able to do these things outdoors again. Okay, I fill in the gap at the top just with a little bit of moss. There wasn't a huge gap, but you know how I put my water bottle upside down? Yeah, for the bottleneck to fit, there's like a little cavity almost. The new cavity for the bottleneck will be now at the top over here. I'll show you. Here, that's where I can then pop the bottle in, and then they will water it from the inside out. And extension time. Look, the reason, maybe not talk while doing the keratize. And the reason why I neglected this plant a little bit in the first place was really because I feel like I've not optimized the maturity, but I don't think it's gonna mature much more than these nice fenestrated leaves I showed you earlier. And don't get me wrong, I'm very, very happy with exactly the leaves as they are. But I just figured, well, okay, since it's probably not gonna grow any larger, let's just create a nice lush bushy look, because the plant is actually a really good candidate for that. Despite having largish leaves, the petioles aren't super long. Like, for example, imagine a philodendron splendid. Ui, jeez. Imagine a philodendron splendid that has like super long petioles, really big leaves, and a really big spread. Imagine that, 360 degrees around the pole, absolute chaos, huh? So most of my big phyllodes are just grown on one side, but sometimes you have this space in your house that really invites for like a nice lush plant. So this one is in my north facing window, and it has been there for the longest time now. And basically that means that some leaves are facing the window. I just kind of rotate it around usually. One side will always face the window, and that's obviously the side that grows the best, and then the other side will face into the room, so that's the side that I get to see. So happy days. Whereas my plants that only grow on one side, they're usually pushed up against the wall, so that the side without leaves is just facing the wall, so, well, you know, nobody's gonna see that. Anyway, okay, let's have a look at this plant. This is basically just a normal chop and extend process, and I have a more in-depth tutorial in my playlist about this process. Alright, do I have any loose ends now? No, not really, huh? But this one, I think I could get a bit into here. So now I'm just looking for like loose ends. Like this one, for example, over here. It's kind of a bit loose, so I just want to bring it closer to the pole so it can root into the pole. And I'm just going to do this using cable ties. Ideally, actually, I would do something like this when it's a bit dehydrated. I actually watered this plant yesterday, which probably was not the best move, because when it's dehydrated, I have less chances of like snapping a petiole or snapping a stem when trying to manipulate it. But today we're doing a YOLO. Am I doing okay, darling? Now, I want to show you a trick. See this over here. The stem was growing up and then it reached the top, and I didn't want to extend it, so I trailed it down, right? And then eventually it's somewhat attached back to the plant. What I want to do is I actually want to chop this bit over here. That way, this part can reshoot, and this part ideally would have rooted into the pole a little bit better, then I would have been more confident, but it's okay. I hope it will root in hindsight, and or it definitely has rooted towards the bottom part over here. The reason I've done that is that so I actually just get another growth shoot that grows up here. A lot of these shoots are actually now somewhere like here or at the bottom because I twisted them back down. So there's hardly anything that immediately wants to grow up this new extension. And I mean, that's what I want them to grow up on. I could do the same with this one over here, but I can see that this has hardly rooted, so I'm not going to do this for now. There's a few plants on here. I really need to see how the plant wants to reshoot now and whereabouts it's going to put its growth hormones and so on, because I was just kind of chopping everything off and, you know, the plant was doing its own thing. So I'm really curious to see how many new shoots there will be, where they come from, how long it's going to take for some of them to reach the actual extension and so on. But, you know, we'll find out. Now let me quickly water this so it's a little more bottom heavy as well. I don't often water the actual pot because usually I don't often actively water the pot. That's usually done passively by the excess water draining from the pole into the pot. But when I pot it up first, that's obviously what I do. And I'm hoping that these roots that are twisted around will very quickly expand. And the see-through pot is really going to give me a chance to spy on those. Now let's park this here maybe. I hope that's flat enough. I'll pop a bottle upside down on here and let gravity do its magic. And hopefully it's stable enough because the ground isn't super stable. Now, you might have noticed over here, what I've done is the water was coming out a little bit too quickly, and it was kind of just going off the pole over here. This moss pole that I put on as an extension is really dry, so it's easier to work with because it's lighter. But dry moss is hydrophobic, so it's going to just repel the water. So I just wiggled it around a little bit until more of the holes in the lid. Here. Sometimes it's like 3, sometimes it's 4, sometimes they're bigger, sometimes they're smaller. I don't really have a proper method here. But more holes were now covered by the moss, so it released a little bit slower. You can see the little bubbles popping up. And, you know, that way I can just kind of somewhat control the speed in which the water releases. If the water releases slower, the moss has more time to actually absorb the water, so it won't just run off the sides, but rather actually be absorbed by the moss. And I suppose that's the point, right? Alright, while that's doing its thing, let's have a look at the bottom part. I mean, this will have some roots over here that are kind of now like plantless, right? This root. And I'm trying to remove as much as I can because otherwise they'll just rot, but honestly it's not such a big issue. I've had this happen many times before and I've never really seen the plant actually suffer as a result of it. I'm just cutting off a few ugly leaves. Keep in mind, so this bottom part is now really ugly, really old, right? And you can really see, oh, I think I might also have mealybugs on here. And you can also see that, oh, which one was which? I think this was the original bottom, and then this was the newest bottom, and then the top here is now the newest bottom. I don't know if you know what I mean. Anyway. But basically the idea was that once I planted these two together, I extended one, and then I wanted the shoots from this plant to reach over and grow into the other moss pole, which is exactly what happened. These 4 shoots over here reached over and climbed onto the other moss pole. So I'm going to do the exact same thing again. I'm going to extend this one, and I'm hoping these will reshoot and also find the extension. No need to fix what's not broken. This is actually quite an old moss pole. You can see I didn't use cable ties back then, I used like this coated wire. So this pole must be at least 4 years old. And obviously something grew on it before, but it didn't grow really well. So I'm just going to reuse it. It's not the best quality moss anymore. It's not like the freshest, but this plant is going to go outside. So I feel like that's okay. I suppose we'll see. If I notice that the pole really doesn't retain any moisture, I might switch it around before the new shoots find their way onto it. Because I mean, right now there's no immediate growth point that wants to grow up this pole. So I've got a little bit of time, and once I see some shoots, so I'm gonna just explore the water retention of this pole over the next few weeks, or like, you know, if it dries out quicker than anything else, then I will, oh shit, I forgot to put moss in there. And if I notice that the water retention is just not up to scratch, then I will just replace it. I mean, you can see the difference between the fresh moss and the old moss. That's okay, I want to reuse as many things as I can. Is that happening? Sometimes when there's too much moss at the top as well, it just blocks it. You want the moss to kind of break the surface tension, but not block the holes. I'll make a little bit bigger of a cavity. There we go, little bubbles. And I'll just give this pot a good watering as well while we're here. And the water is dark because I put GT Foliage Focus and GT Root Zone in there, both linked in the description. Alright, I'll let that do its thing for a minute. I'll put this back. Alrighty, and I suppose that's it. I will put this one back inside, and this one will go on the fence right behind me. And then we're gonna check in a couple of weeks or months or however long it might be to see how these plants are recovering from the shock. If the plant likes outdoors or indoors or both. Well, we just have a little check-in, you know, after the pudding has been cooking for a little bit. Anyway, I will see you soon. And welcome back. It has been 10 weeks since I've given my El Salvador a chop and extend, and I'm here to show you the results. Why don't we start off with the top part, because the top part is the one I normally keep, or like the whole purpose of the chop and extend is to continuously grow the top part. So let's start off with that one, and we'll park this one on the side. So this is the top half of my El Salvador, and it was in my north facing window right in the corner. Now we are in the middle of summer, and I actually get the least amount of direct light in my north facing window because the sun is so high up. As we're heading into autumn and then winter, it will actually get more direct sun in that spot, but obviously less sunlight hours. So I think, to be honest, a north-facing window is not actually that great, especially over summer. I do prefer east or west-facing windows, but I actually only have one of those, which is right over there. And my Deliciosa is already getting that one. So I don't think it is like the best exposure to actually have indoors, but it has grown really well. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I think the main thing, and we also need to clean it up a little bit today, but I hope you can see this. Remember in the last update, there was a vine that went up here, did a U-turn, and I trailed it back down. I chopped that because I wanted that vine to reshoot at the top. It did reshoot at the top, which is this shoot over here, which has given me this leaf first. Unfortunately, it got a little bit, I don't know where this damage comes from, but it is one of the biggest leaves it has ever grown. So that to me is pretty crazy. I mean, maybe you can see this one is an older leaf. This one is the new leaf. So definitely the biggest one it's ever grown, I believe. Followed by this one, which is probably even bigger. Yeah, some really, really big leaves straight after the reshoot. So you can really see this is the shoot over here, and it's only grown 2 leaves so far. So this, I suppose, is now the main shoot, I would say, and there's actually no reduction in leaf size as a result of the chop and extend. It actually increased in leaf size as a result of the chop and extend, which just means that the proportion of the cutting I took as part of the chop and extend was proportionally in line with the root system that I took. So there's plenty of roots to facilitate this growth. And we know there was plenty of roots. We saw them when I chopped them off. Now the other part, the one that goes down, hasn't reshot.
But to be honest, I wasn't too sure if it's going to reshoot at the top or somewhere at the bottom. It is definitely a bit messy. And what I have noticed is lots of little shoots popping up everywhere. There's a little shoot here. There's a little shoot here. There is, I found another little shoot earlier. There's a little shoot here. This one. I also definitely have mealybugs, so I'm definitely going to take this outside and give it a little treatment in a sec. Actually, the only thing I've got at home is this scale gun, but it says mealybugs as well, so better than nothing. But I haven't really dealt with mealybugs before, so that's okay. To be honest, I'm not really stressed about it, which is weird because I know people really freak out about mealybugs, but I don't know. I'm not worried. Anyway, I was talking about the small vines. So I think we got to do something with these. Good example. Let me show you. See this vine? No, you cannot see this. There's too many leaves in the way. There's a vine over here. Now you can see it. This vine over here. Maybe. It's one of these vines that was trailed up and down the moss pole. Didn't really make a connection with the moss pole. So it hasn't really gotten a big root system in the moss pole. Ever since I repotted it, this vine went crazy. Look at this, and I don't think, you probably can't see the full one, I need to tilt it. It then started growing up the extension. I did help it out a little bit with a little clip because I was looking for it. But see how fast it is vining and actually having all of these empty nodes without leaves? Eventually I managed to clip it into the moss pole and it actually started attaching and it then started giving me leaves. But it is just growing so quickly. In 10 weeks, it has reached the top of the moss pole. But that is not the kind of growth I want to reach the top of the moss pole. I want thick stems like this one to slowly start climbing up and growing large leaves with small internodal spacing. So despite these two vines being growing in the same position, in the same substrate, given the same nutrients, one is vining like crazy with really large internodal spacing and one is actually doing really well. I don't have an explanation for you. I think the only explanation I would have for you would be that, well, one of them has thoroughly rooted into the pole, so it has lots of roots, whereas the other one is only now starting to root into the pole. Why exactly it's growing so fast and so far, I honestly don't know. You would think that if it doesn't have roots, it would just not grow at all. But what I do know is that that's not what I want. This plant has now reached the top of the moss pole and, well, technically I would have to extend it again, which is obviously not what I want. I want this to become lush again, but I want large leaves, not small leaves. If I want small leaves, I would just get the regular Siltepecana, not the El Salvador. So I'm going to cut this off. And I think this is maybe something that a lot of people are experiencing and are then kind of frustrated with moss poles or don't really see how moss poles can help your plants increase and so on. And I'm just going to rip it out. I can't be asked. But you can see it actually did have decent roots in the moss pole. But yeah, this is not what I want. And I think now that I chopped it, where I chopped it, it will reshoot, and I'm going to make sure that that reshoot goes into the moss pole straight away, and then hopefully it can actually mature rather than just trying to run away. So that I have done previously, and I have definitely noticed that sometimes by just giving a plant a chop, it actually induces much larger growth and stops them from running away, especially if a plant is prone to grow runners like an amedrium or an obliqua and so on. I actually just cut off the runners and hope that the reshoot isn't going to just run away again, but instead give me nice leaves. Obviously subject to providing the plant with good conditions, but if I wouldn't provide the plant with good conditions, I wouldn't see this amazing growth over here. So I'm not mad. So yeah, at this stage I can really only see one big growth point, which is this one over here. So yeah, I mean, that's okay. I'm sure over time I'll see more growth points popping up, but I definitely need to keep on top of cutting off these vines before they just keep vining like crazy again. Obviously, with these large leaves, they also shade everything behind that, so it could also be that these smaller vines are just not getting that much light because of the mature plant in front of it. So be it. That's okay. I reckon once this plant reaches the top of the moss pole, I will actually start trailing it down again and do something similar, because yeah, I don't think I want to continuously chop and extend this plant. I already have 2 of them now, so I don't need to chop again and again and again. I think I'll aim for a lush one again. Anyway, moral of the story, really happy I finally did the chop and extend. The chop and extend actually induced larger growth than it ever had before. And I suppose we have heaps of potential. Imagine how large these leaves could be by the time the plant reaches the top. Alrighty, let's park this on the side. Oh, let's maybe look at roots. Silly me, because it does have a very nice root system established within the pot already. As you can see, it's almost root bound already. That's okay. I might just have to size up the pot in a couple of months' time, see how we go, but I suppose most of the rooting will now be done within the pole. Most of the rooting. And I will just give this one, not with the big vine, I think I'll just give this as it is to Tim. We'll pop it in his garden. Everything in his garden seems to explode at the moment, and I think it would be really nice for him to have a El Salvador grow up his fence. And this goes in the bin. Alrighty, let's look at the next part. This is the bottom part of the pole, and this was growing outdoors the whole time. We've actually had a really hot December and really dry, so I had to do very frequent watering out there. I actually watered my garden every day, and with every watering I hose down my poles out there. But for the last 4 days it has rained consistently, and by consistently I mean constantly. I will chop off a bit of ugly growth while I'm talking to you, but it has actually grown so well. I'm really happy with this, and keep in mind this is the bottom part, so the bottom part didn't come with its own growth points because I chopped off the growth points. So the bottom part is usually a little bit slower in recovering because it needs to re-establish the growth points again. However, it has a huge root system and now way less plant to support with this root system. So it should technically still have great potential to reshoot, and that's exactly what it did. Let me show you. It actually reshot in lots and lots of spots. It has this, can you see this? It has this reshoot over here. It's given me the first leaf. Look at this as a first leaf. That is super decent, right? And this is now its second leaf over here. Also super decent and still really soft, so it can still inflate. Remember these little shoots over here that are cut off? Those were shoots that went from this pole onto the extension. I then chopped off the extension and now I put a new one on there. These are all reshooting again. Shoot here, and a shoot here. And now I'm also waiting for them to again find their way onto the extension and then grow up, and then I have many plants on the extension, right? So I can do it over and over again, but of course this bottom pole is eventually getting really old and not that nice looking anymore. But so far, so good. Look at this new growth over here as well. Decent size, another new shoot here. Now on this side of the pole, this is where my normal chop and extend, I suppose, happened. There were 2 vines that actually went from this bottom part onto the extension. They were obviously both cut as part of the chop and extend. I've got a new shoot over here that has grown this as a first leaf, and then over the fenestration on the second leaf. And I've got a second new shoot over here. First leaf, second leaf, and now unfurling the third leaf over here. And I think that is it, right? Yeah. So how many growth points do I have on here now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, way more growth points on the bottom part, which I'm again not surprised, because basically every time I chop a stem at the bottom, which I did 6 times, every stem should really redistribute the growth hormones and give me a new shoot, which they have. I am definitely positively surprised by the size of these new shoots already, and the fact that they're also giving me fenestrations. And I'm confident that within another month or 2, most of them will have found their way onto the extension, which means I might then have 6 shoots growing up the extension. And by then, if the leaf increase continues, don't think they'll be far off from these sort of leaves over here. So you know what, it might actually be that this plant in the long run thrives more than the top part that I would normally use. But I suppose that is also subject to this plant currently growing outdoors, and we are in the best part of the year, right? If I would have done the same experiment in half a year's time, going into winter, the plant that's growing indoors will definitely have a much easier time recovering from whatever shock than the plant that is growing outdoors would ever have. But at the moment, the conditions out there are pretty perfect. You know, it's super sunny, but it's shaded by a nice tree, so it gets like the bright indirect light, you know, and a really high humidity, usually between 60 to 80% humidity out there, and the temperatures are always above at least 20. It's almost too hot. There was a few days where we had 37, 38, 39 and so on, but I think the Monstera isn't mad about that. Every now and then I also find some roots in here, like these roots over here, for example, that are cut off, right? They belong to the top part, but it's not really a concern. I mean, I can just rip them off, as you can see now, but I think I can just do more damage by actually ripping them off. I think I'll just let them be there. It's fine. But it is not as big of a concern as I actually initially thought it would be in theory. Or, I mean, initially, like a few years ago when I did this process for the first time. I think it's one of these things that in theory sound way more scary than they actually are in practice. Let me continue chopping off some ugly leaves because I don't like looking at them. But this is so dry compared to this one that was soaked by the rain today. So maybe I'll put it in the rain today and also treat it for the mealybugs. Anyway, in conclusion, when performing a chop and extend, I personally usually focus on the top part of the plant because that's the part that has the newest leaf, the freshest leaf, the largest leaves, and so on. Now with this particular example, it was a little bit different because I wasn't following my normal chop and extend principles where I actually perform the chop and extend when the plant reaches the top, but instead I twisted the plant back and forth all the time. So as a result of that, I actually decided to work with both parts because both parts now have many shoots on them and can be turned into something really nice. So you don't just need to focus on the top part of the pole when performing a chop and extend. You can totally actually extend both of them if you want to double the impact of your chop and extend. I personally don't usually have enough space, but I do believe that this is going to be a plant that could live in my courtyard year round and look good year round, hence the decision to actually keep the bottom part and let it build resilience to my outdoor environment. Just because you perform a chop does not necessarily mean that you're going to induce a whole lot of shock. If you're following the principles of the chop and extend and you ensure that your plant has thoroughly rooted into the pole, then you don't necessarily have to experience any shock at all. If anything, you could even induce larger growth than ever. That, of course, is subject to the conditions as well. The conditions will always set the potential. You can only realize the potential with things like the chop and extend, the moss pole, the watering, the nutrient provision. If the potential isn't set by the conditions in the first place, I can give this the best moss pole, the best nutrients, the best whatever, it won't recover from the shock or it won't thrive post-shock or post-chop. Hence, my recommendation to do chop and extends or in general propagation in spring or summer while during the growing season and be a little bit more conservative over autumn and winter with these chop and extends, because the better the conditions you can offer the plant post-chop, the quicker and the more successful will be the recovery. But hopefully it's a good example that encourages you to actually go ahead and chop your plants, because chopping your plants can sometimes actually bring the best out of these plants. And yeah, I think that is about it. If you want to learn more about the chop and extend, I have done this probably hundreds of times on my YouTube channel by now. There's in-depth tutorials, which I will link in the description, as well as in my moss pole playlist, which is always linked at the end screen. So please check those out if you want to learn more about the chop and extends and watch me perform chop and extends with various plants. It is definitely a staple of my journey, my plant journey, something I do a lot, and it really transformed my plant hobby. If it wasn't for the chop and extend method, I honestly don't know if I would be as successful in growing plants and if I would be enjoying it as much as well. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up, leave a nice comment, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, turn on the bell notification, share the video with your friends, watch it again. Engaging with my content is by far the best way for you guys to support me, and thank you in advance. Happy growing and take care.